It's 1 week until the election now, and we are in Barnet. Welcome to Question Time. And on our panel here, the Conservative Brexit Secretary, David Davis, Labour's Shadow International Trade Secretary, Barry Gardiner, the former Deputy Prime Minister, former leader of the Liberal Democrats, Nick Clegg, UKIP's Deputy Chair, Suzanne Evans, and the leader of the SNP in the House of Commons, Angus Robertson. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Remember, at home, in this febrile atmosphere the last few days before the election, you can join in the debate. You've got Twitter, Facebook and hashtag BBCQT all at your disposal, or you can text 83981. If you push the red button, you can see what other people are saying on the screen. Our first question from Alla Hayes, please. Alla Hayes.
If Theresa May can't debate, can she negotiate?
Nick Clegg.
I think it was a great shame that she didn't participate in those debates. I think these television debates, having been a participant in a few of them in the past, I think there's something that people have got used to, because they allow you, from the comfort of your living room, to look at the way in which different leaders of different parties measure up to each other. And this sort of tendency to take a rather kind of standoffish, slightly haughty approach to these things is not the kind of demeanour you'd want when you're having to cajole and charm and persuade 27 other countries to see our point of view, which of course is the main and very difficult task facing whoever's in number 10 from June the 9th onwards. So I think it was a disservice to this election. I also don't think it's a great sort of advertisement for the kind of skills needed for a complex negotiation.
She is facing a Question Time audience tomorrow, like this audience, which is never an easy ride.
He's got his plug-in, he's got his advertisements in.
No, it's just that. No, it's just she chose to do that. You can't force people to debate.
Sure, no, you can't. But, of course, being questioned by you and by audiences like this, of course, is an absolute integral part of our political culture. But debating between political leaders is also and to say that she does it every Wednesday is a nonsense. I've sat through these appallingly sort of pre-orchestrated lines that the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition trade across the dispatch box for half an hour midday on Wednesday. It's nothing like the spontaneous debate that I think people deserve at election time.
OK, Barry Gardiner?
She called the election. I think she should have done the British people the courtesy of turning up and arguing for her policies. The point is that you can say, well, was it arrogance? Was it fear of being confronted in the way that she had been on Monday night and laughed at? I think that if you are the Prime Minister of this country and you have called an election, ostensibly, as you say, on the basis of Brexit, because it's so important, despite the fact that 7 times you've said you're not going to call it because Brexit is so important that you have to get on with the negotiations, then I do think that you have to show real mettle, turn up, take the flak, and show that you're the person who can do that.
But your leader... Your leader didn't hot-foot it till the studio until the day before, did he? There was no notice he was coming.
The same day. Absolutely.
Same day.
And I think, you know, the interesting thing is that...
So he was reluctant too.
In politics and in campaigns, there's policy, there's strategy...
And there's mischief.
And there's tactics. And it was very clear that we put pressure on the Prime Minister to turn up and be Prime Ministerial.
OK.
She refused to do it.
Angus Robertson.
Well, I was part of the debate last night, and I turned up, and I'm sorry the Prime Minister didn't. And I think we just need to... I think the first thing I'd like to say about it is we are living in the 21st century, and a really big part of our politics and our national debate takes place through television. And I agree with Nick. There are different formats in elections, and it's good that there are programmes, and they involve us, and they involve other colleagues as well, and that's fine. But what is absolutely normal in pretty much every democracy is that you see the party leaders debate one another. And so far, the only debate I've seen the Prime Minister involved in was sitting on a couch with her husband on The One Show. I mean, it's just, that is not serious. The Prime Minister should be tested by colleagues. She should have the confidence in her arguments. And it leaves you with the thought, and that's perhaps what the question comes back to. What faith can we have, what trust can we have in her abilities to negotiate on our behalf, regardless of whether we voted Leave or Remain? This is going to be a huge challenge for whoever the Prime Minister is.
Okay.
And they're not even prepared to turn up for a television debate. Whatever happened to Strong and Stable? Where did that go?
Nicola Sturgeon, I didn't see her there. Yeah, so you were sent instead.
No, I'm the Westminster leader of the SNP, and I have the good fortune to ask the Prime Minister 2 questions every week. The leader of the Labour Party has 6 questions, and the idea that you go from having to face tough questions from your opponents in Parliament to an election campaign and suddenly you stop, I just think, come on, that's not serious.
OK, the woman here in the front, let's just go on. The question being about whether she can negotiate as well as the debating.
But
yes.
the problem is, we're now just in a debacle talking about why she wasn't there. We're not talking about politics anymore. And yesterday it was just an embarrassment to watch politicians talk as they did, because it wasn't so much a debate, it was how you can put each other down and shout over each other. And it's just not helpful.
And the woman behind you, yes.
I want to see a woman of substance running this country. I don't want to see a soap star and how many brownie points they can score. I thought not being there didn't make that much of a difference.
Didn't make that much difference. You're for her.
I am.
Suzanne Evans.
Well, Strong and Stable went all weak and wobbly, didn't it? You know, she called this election, as Barry said. It's a failure of leadership for her not to show up. I think the problem is the Conservatives expected to breeze through this election. They expected to get a 200-seat majority. They put forward an ill-conceived, uncosted manifesto. And then suddenly they made it all about Theresa May. And then suddenly Theresa May starts to fall apart. And it was interesting watching her interview on Monday night, the debate that she did and the interview she did with Jeremy Paxman. And I think then we saw actually why she was going to pull out of this debate, because it's clearly not her forte at all. But that said, I have to say, talking about negotiation, you know, I think she also didn't, she wouldn't state in that interview with Jeremy Paxman that she believed in Brexit. She couldn't say, she was really pushed to have to say she'd walk away from a bad deal, and she admitted straight up that we'd have to pay the EU something to leave. All of those things, I think, are completely wrong.
All right. You, sir.
I would agree with a lot of what was just said. I think it's completely stupid tactics. It's shooting yourself in the foot for Amber Rudd to have come on the debate yesterday and then to have started her opening statement by saying the election's all about leadership and do you want Theresa May or do you want Jeremy Corbyn? When Theresa May wasn't even in the debate. I think it's completely it's the wrong tactics for the Conservatives to employ to make the debate, to make the election about leadership when your leader isn't even at the debate.
Well, David Davis is the Secretary of State for Brexit, so he can answer both parts of the questions. If Theresa May can't debate, can she negotiate?
Well, I mean, let's start with the can't debate bit first. I mean, Nick dismisses the sort of Wednesday exchange that takes place between her and all the leaders of the opposition, in which basically, forgive me, Angus, she wipes the floor with all of them. And has done for 9 months, or 9 or 10 months. So I don't think really being afraid of them is the issue. And it wasn't just in that. I mean, even the very first week she was Prime Minister, she took the Trident debate and was formidable in that. So look back if you're interested in her debating skills. But general elections are more than just about television. And of course, television gets very obsessed about TV debates. So I did a programme with Corbyn on Monday, and she's doing one with you tomorrow, and she will be challenged in those, I'm sure. But it's also about other things. I mean, she's done about 5,500 miles around the country, 59 meetings, 4 times as many questions from journalists as Mr Corbyn has faced. So it's hardly walking away from that. And as for the debating, as for the negotiating side of the question, I've seen her at work with the European Union leaders, European Commission in particular, and she is formidable. I mean, when we negotiated the outcome of the what's called the Justice and Home Affairs, when she was Home Secretary, she had to deal with the Justice and Home Affairs brief in Europe. She negotiated us out of 100 out of 135 aspects of the treaty, because that was important to the British interest, and she did it very effectively. So the answer to the question is she can both debate and she can negotiate, as you're going to see, assuming we get the result we want next week, in the next 2 years.
OK. I'm going to keep moving, so we've got a lot of questions. We're talking about Brexit, so let's go to Brexit straight away. Remember what Theresa May has been saying through this is better no deal than a bad deal. Margaret Miller, your question, please.
What does a bad Brexit deal for the UK look like to you?
This goes to the heart of the thing. What would a bad Brexit deal for the UK look like? To you, Suzanne Evans.
Well, in our manifesto, which I have here, UKIP set out 6 Brexit tests, which we say have to be met in order to get the Brexit that the people of Great Britain voted for. And first of all, that's the legal test. It means that Parliament's got to resume its supremacy of lawmaking. It means we're completely free of the European courts. The migration test, we've got to have full control of our borders back and control of immigration and asylum. The maritime test, we've got to take back full control of our fishing waters and the rights that our fishermen have under international law. Trade, we need to have our seat back on the World Trade Organization. We've got to be out of the single market, out of the customs union. And critically also, I don't think we should be paying any money to the European Union to leave. We've got about £9 billion vested in the European Investment Bank. We have contributed for decades to this organisation. And they have the cheek to say that they want money back. We put in a lot more than many, many other countries. And the other thing that we think it should all be done and dusted by the end of 2019. Although I have to say, if it went to the 1st of January 2020, I wouldn't be too upset.
OK, so that's your shopping list. Nick Clegg.
I think
what would a deal, in Theresa May's words, that would be better not to have one at all? What would a bad deal be?
I'm not actually entirely clear, nor I think is the government, because an absence of a deal is a very bad outcome itself, because it consigns us to a sort of legal and economic sort of vacuum, really, where all the relationships we've built up over 40 years collapse overnight. I think it would be a very, very bad outcome indeed, and it should be avoided at all costs. But I think, for me, the acid test is what kind of deal serves our economy the most? Jobs, money in people's pockets, the economic opportunities for our kids and our grandchildren. Here is the fundamental dilemma. It is this. There is no deal I can conceive of which gives us as much economic benefit as the one in which we now presently located in the heart of the single market created by Margaret Thatcher and others many years ago. It's the most sophisticated open market of its kind, not just tariff-free, but also rule-free. Everyone abides by the same kind of rule book. So we're in this extraordinary situation that almost any outcome that David Davis and Theresa May come up with will involve less trade and therefore less wealth and less prosperity than that we have at the moment. That is beyond dispute. There is no version, no deal at all, which leads to more trade. And this idea, before Suzanne and David say so, that you can replace the trade you lose on your own doorstep with trade deals with countries in far-flung locations is a complete illusion.
Why?
Because they're far away and geography counts.
Far away, geography counts. My goodness, we're not trading with America, with China, with India.
We are, but much less so. There's a reason why we trade with
Ireland. We can do more with that with the free trade deal.
But hang on, there's a reason why we trade with Ireland more than we do with China, twice as much with Belgium than we do with India, 3 times as much with Sweden than we do with Brazil. Why? Because they're close. We're close to those to our closest economic export markets. So my great worry is we're going to have months and months and months of sort of arguments about this. The thing you need to look out for is any deal giving us as much trade to our largest export markets as we have at the moment. And I simply don't see any way in which any deal can provide us with as much economic benefit as the trading relationships we have at the moment in the single market.
So any deal is a bad deal, but you know that the vote went in favour of leaving. So you're on the horns of a dilemma.
No, absolutely. So I think it is minimising the damage. I mean, people from my point of view, and by the way, this is the way it's widely seen in other European capitals. I speak to many politicians in other European capitals. They see it, I think, much more realistically than many Brexiteers do. They say, this is bad for us, it's bad for you, we will try and minimise the damage. But that, bluntly, is what this exercise is now about.
David Davis.
Can I start, I want to answer the question, but can I start by just dealing with the point Nick has made, because it's just fundamentally wrong. Yeah. In 1999, 60% of our trade was with Europe and 40% with the rest of the world. Now, It's roughly 42% with Europe and 58% with the rest of the world. So A, it's bigger in total. B, it's growing a devil of a lot faster. So the idea that enabling more access to that market, no matter how distant it is, because the death of distance is the phrase used about the way trade is developing now, means that there is a huge prize to be won, in enhancing our trade with the rest of the world, whilst, as far as we can, continuing frictionless free trade with Europe. And that's what we all say we're trying on both sides of the negotiating table there. But to do that, to achieve that, to deliver a good deal for Britain, you've got to believe in Britain. You've got to believe that we can actually do this, that the English language, our institutions, our commercial skills and so on are up to it. And we do believe that, and that's something Theresa May does believe. Now, what's a bad deal? Well, the first thing to say is that we had a referendum last year, and a bad deal is what doesn't deliver on what the referendum asked for. And broadly speaking, if you talk to people who voted to leave in the referendum, what they say is they voted to get back control of borders, laws and money. And that's the fundamental. So if you don't achieve that, first off, that's a bad deal. And if you want another measure of a bad deal, look at the sorts of things that have come out of the European Commission in the last month or so in terms of their ever-growing bid. You know, £100 billion here, ECJ control over European citizens within the UK, not elsewhere, a refusal to accept our control of our borders, the being inside the customs union still and unable to do the deal with the rest of the world, having oversight of our tax, one of the things they've asked for, oversight of our labour laws and so on. These together would all add up to a bad deal. And the problem that the Labour Party has with this is that if it's not willing to walk away, that is precisely what it will get. Yeah. A very bad deal indeed.
Yeah. I'll come to you all in a minute. Let's just hear Barry Gardiner on that. Keep your hands up. Well, when he's talked, now come
Look,
to you.
David is absolutely wrong, because you do not pursue free trade in the world by leaving the largest free trade bloc in the world, which is the European Union. That is a nonsense. And if you look at what's happening here, this is the first time that any group of countries have actually been negotiating not to reduce the barriers to trade between themselves, but to increase those barriers. Now, we've chosen to do that, and I respect the decision to do that, and the Labour Party will leave the European Union. That is clear, because we respect the democratic mandate of the people. But be clear equally that when we do, what we will be doing is doing it for political reasons, not for economic reasons. And therefore, all the things that David talked about that are really precious to him and many people in the Conservative Party, about getting rid of the controls of Europe, getting rid of the European courts being able to rule in our country. Let's take some good examples. Just a week or so ago, the government was taken to the Supreme Court, well, actually the High Court a few weeks ago. Before that, it was the Supreme Court, because this government refuses to obey the directive on air pollution, to eliminate air pollution in this country. And time again, it's been taken to the Supreme Court. In this country, the UK Supreme Court, and it's been found wanting. Now, under Europe, we have some protections there. There can be infraction proceedings brought against the country. But there are not those protections once David has got his way, and therefore we have to understand...
Sorry, I don't want to stop you in full flow on that, but I want to go back to something you said just a moment ago. You said, therefore, we're negotiating for political reasons. The implication being that you think that economically, for the welfare, the well-being, prosperity, jobs in UK, leaving will be bad. That's your starting position.
Exactly what Nick said earlier is that there will be less trade with Europe. There will be more barriers to trade with Europe.
Will we be a poorer country? Is your position will be poorer?
Absolutely. 44% of our exports at the moment go to the European Union, and they go tariff-free. Ask our farmers. They would have to, if we go on to WTO rules, which is the no-deal scenario, It's a deal. Just a different situation. But if we go to WTO rules, our sheep farmers will pay 44% tariffs to export into Europe.
So
they'll be paying 10% tariffs for wheat products.
How are you going to negotiate?
If you're a negotiator and you start out assuming failure, how much success do you think
It's not about no. Absolutely not. And you know this. It's not assuming failure. Failure is to go on to WTO rules, and that is the trick that you are playing on the British public. The confidence trick the Tories are playing is that they are saying that no deal is actually quite a good deal. It's not.
Barry,
it's the worst
No,
deal.
we haven't said that.
Okay. Angus Robertson.
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is I totally respect and understand that south of the border people voted to leave the European Union. I respect that. And I hope that people respect that we in Scotland voted to stay. And the people, I hear there's some heckling, some friendly heckling, people reminding me that the good people of London voted to stay. Thank you. Thank you for that helpful intervention. The people of London, the people of Scotland and the people of Northern Ireland voted to stay. So my starting point in this is that I think a bad Brexit deal is one where the UK government doesn't try at least to take account of the different views, the different hopes and aspirations in the different parts of the UK. And the Scottish government has worked very hard, put a compromise deal on the table. There was a promise, of course, from the UK government that Article 50 would not be triggered without an agreement involving the devolved administrations, which was then totally ignored. So there's no agreement. And so what is a bad deal? Right, let's not talk about Scotland for a second. Let's talk about Ireland. Having no deal means a hard border between the United Kingdom and the Irish Republic. Now, there are some people in this audience who are too young to remember what having border posts meant in Ireland. That is something that everybody, no matter where we come from, should be very, very concerned about. Now, already, we have political parties in Northern Ireland saying they want a border poll. In Scotland, the Scottish government was elected last year with a mandate that there should be a referendum at the end of the Brexit negotiations, and we should have a choice on our future, not have it imposed on us. So my point is this really simple one. To David and his colleagues, if he is serious about wanting to say that they care about the views of the different nations and regions in the UK, they'd better start acting on it, because otherwise it will be seen for what it is, a total hollow promise. And the consequences of it, as we head towards a hard Brexit, is frankly that Scotland and Northern Ireland will be making decisions about how can we protect our place in the single European market, because it really, really matters
So what's
to
to be
industry
done?
and jobs.
Just briefly, what's to be done if the rest of the EU is hostile, as one does here, they may well be, to the idea of Britain leaving, you accept the referendum?
Well, this
and
is,
you're
this is
giving, what advice are you giving, David Davis? I
But
don't
this is
understand.
the real mystery to me. I cannot understand why a unionist government wouldn't say, we have real problems with the SNP and your vision of independence. We don't support all of that. But you know what? We are going to go into these negotiations and we'll try. Because we think having a good relationship with Scotland, with Northern Ireland, really matters. Now, we can't guarantee success. We're not sure we can secure a place in the single market. Right. But we'll try. Do you know the problem is? You don't care enough to even try, David. Well, you're not bothered. You're not bothered.
OK, just briefly, do we know what you're going to do, David? I don't want to go to the audience, because a lot of hands up.
Well, let me just...
Are you not bothered about
yes, of course
these
we're bothered. I mean, let's just respond.
So what are you going to do about it?
Let's just respond to this. Well, first thing we're going to do is, I mean, I'm going to say to the audience to recognise something, which is this, that the Scottish National Party, throughout this entire process, has had one thing at the front of its mind, trying to get another referendum on independence. Full stop. And that's driven everything. I have chaired a number of meetings, the Prime Minister chaired others, in which were attended by the members of the Scottish Government, members of the Northern Ireland Executive when it existed, and then delegates after that, and members of the Welsh Government. And I have to say, the one group that was most at odds with the entire process was the Scottish Nationalist Party. Now, David,
you're getting into tit-for-tat stuff.
No.
What he asked was what you're going to do to protect Scottish interests.
What we tried to do, we did 50, 60, I think, sectoral analyses of every single industry in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, England, and looked at the best way of protecting them. Now, we have to deliver on the requirement of the referendum, which is control of our borders, control of our laws, control of our money. The only way we can do that, we can't do that inside the single market. That will not be acceptable to the European Union. So we looked for the alternative to protect as far as is possible, indeed 100% protection if we can manage it, and that is a free trade area with a customs agreement. That is designed to get the most frictionless free trade, tariff-free trade between ourselves and the European Union. And that, if it works, will deliver both the benefits of being in and the benefits of being out.
OK. I want to go to members of the audience. You madam, here.
I voted in the whether we should join the common market. And what I voted for was a common market. I did not vote to be ruled by Europe or to have a court in Europe that could overrule the British court.
And for you, what would a bad deal... Are you worried about the deal for the UK? What would a bad deal be?
No, I'm not.
You're not?
I think that Theresa May will take us to a deal that is fair. You've got... If you go into any clothing shop, any woman's clothing shop, you've got goods from all over the world. If you travel and you go to China, you will find Marks and Spencer's and other places from Great Britain. And I don't think that that's going to change at all.
OK. You, sir, in the fourth row.
Now you realise that immigration's destroyed the country. Why don't you look back 10, 15 years ago, those applicants that came from India, Pakistan, all Asia state, re-interview them, give them literacy or numeracy tests. It would clearly mean they went to a bogus college. That's why the whole North UK is full of my community everywhere. Migration's messed up your country because they've got their indefinite stay. Now, this is not England anymore. What country are we in? There's hardly no your colour faces anymore in this country. And especially the student visa crime has really upset you the time Blair and Brown were in power. Now you realised it. So why don't you once again re-interview these students, give them literacy or numeracy tests to resit. If they fail a test, it will clearly mean they went to a bogus college yesterday and those colleges lie on their behalf.
So you want actually to start expelling people from the UK?
Well, that's it. It's got to have to, because now accidentally you've let in these people coming in from the non-EU, and now they've got their indefinite stay.
Suzanne Evans, do you want to answer his point? Do you agree with him?
Well, no, I mean, let's be clear. Migration brings a lot of good to this country.
Yeah.
But the thing is... And I'm certainly not going to start wanting to kick anybody out of the country. I think that's grossly unfair, particularly not EU nationals. And in fact, UKIP made it clear back in our 2015 general election manifesto that if we got an EU referendum, we would certainly give EU nationals who are already here the right to remain. And we stand by that.
Okay.
But you know, there is a question, I think, for new migrants once we've left the European Union. I think we do need to exercise much more control over who we come. And yeah, I agree certainly that one of those things might well be people who can speak English.
All right, the woman there in the back row. I'll come to you. Yes.
It's a bad deal. A bad deal is the Tory party boasting that people voted to leave when it was by 4%. Cameron should have made a deal that there had to be at least 10% before we left, because people didn't know what they were voting for, and now we're in this
Of course, it is now said that people who voted to remain have accepted the result, and only a small proportion stick with the idea.
69% of people now want to leave.
Result.
No, yeah, we haven't left.
OK, Barry Gardner.
Want to leave.
I wanted to come back to Margaret's question, because she asked, what does a bad deal look like? And I think a bad deal is one where we have an increase in the tariff and non-tariff barriers. That means the costs of our exports and imports are going to go up. But it could also be if we then shackle ourselves by not being able to expand into the rest of the world as well. And therefore, what David was saying, there is a grain of truth in what he was saying about the way in which world trade, and it is only a grain.
There's quite a lot, actually, Barry. Quite a
the way in which the rest of the world and our trade with the rest of the world needs to grow and is growing. But actually, if you look at the top 10 Commonwealth countries put together, that's including India, including Pakistan, including Australia, including Canada, the top 10 make up simply 8% of our exports, not the 44% that the European Union does. And if you take all 52 or 54 Commonwealth countries, they make up just 9% of all our exports.
Okay.
So you have to balance what we may lose from the 44% that goes to Europe to how quickly we think we could make up the rest with the rest of the world.
Okay. I'm going to keep... There's some hands up there. I'm going to keep this moving. I just want to ask, from what the gentleman said up there, David Davis, you've got this target back in of 100,000 net migration by the end of the Parliament, of the new Parliament, if you're there. Is that a figure you recognise? Is that going to happen? Is that actually the policy?
Well, yes, the tens of thousands. I mean, just to remind people, it's
what it is at the moment. Yes, 248,000.
Yes, exactly.
Yet
yes,
you promised
that's right.
3 times.
Wait a minute. Let me answer the question.
Records, that's a good
I might even have a smidgen of a point. You never know.
A grain.
A grain of a point. There we are. I'll get the language right. Always have the Scots to help me. The thing to say here is, look, people want migration to be brought under control. As Suzanne said, this does not mean we do not want to be generous to migrants. It doesn't mean we don't value migrants. But it's a question of numbers. And it will be a question of bringing it down gradually, because we don't want to cause shortages, labour shortages. We want to continue to compete in the battle for talent worldwide. So much of our business is knowledge-based.
But within the Parliament, within 5 years?
That wasn't actually the manifesto. It was we will bring it down. We didn't say, we didn't put a date. We would like to do it in the Parliament, but I think it will be dictated by a number of things. The economy, the speed with which we can get our own people trained up to take the jobs, the changes in the welfare to encourage people to work, to take jobs as well, they don't do now, a whole series of things which we designed to ensure that this is an economically successful policy.
But the aim
But you've had this target for 7 years, David. You've had the target for 7 years. You're now saying it's not going to be fulfilled for the next 5 years.
Hang on a second.
12
Wait
years.
a minute.
When will it be fulfilled?
You're keen for it to be fulfilled,
You
think it should be reached?
We have been a member of the European Union for that time, which means we don't control half of it.
Oh, come on, David.
But wait a minute, let me finish. Let me finish.
You knew that when you set the target.
David, you know as well as I do, since the turn...
Let me finish.
Let me finish. Hold on, Nick, I'll come to you.
And the non-European migration peaked at about 265,000. It's now about 175,000. It's coming down. But slowly, but it's got to be
David,
managed
sorry, I
carefully.
just want to clarify this. Are you saying that it is Tory party policy, if you're re-elected as the government next Thursday, to get it down to 100,000 within the 5 years of a parliament?
No,
is that your aim?
To get it down. The aim, yes, but we can't promise within 5 years. That's the point.
I mean, this constant refrain you get from the Conservatives that they've been held back from dealing with immigration because of the European Union. Here is a fact. In terms of total net immigration into our country since the turn of the century, only a quarter of that total has come from within the European Union. If we had wanted to as a country, it is ludicrous to start penalising Danish engineers, German doctors, Portuguese nurses because of a systemic failure of government after government after government, of various persuasions to deal with immigration on a much larger... But can I just make a wider point? We know, because we've heard this from Whitehall, we know what a no deal looks like. The Treasury published official statistics last year which said that if we have a so-called free trade agreement, the one I think you prefer, the sort of Canada one, that would cost this country, according to our own Treasury in Whitehall, £36 billion per year. If we have no deal, according to official government statistics, it would cost us £45 billion a year. The government, your government, has never denied that. Do you deny those statistics?
I'll point something out to you.
No. Just answer the question, David. Answer the question. Do you still stand by the statistics?
I am going to point something out to you.
David, wait.
Answer the question.
Look, this is no good barracking. Just let David Davis answer. I want to go on to more questions.
Just forecasts from the same sources that said immediately after the vote to leave in the referendum, there will be a minus. There will be a reduction in the size of the British economy. And then in the last quarter and the current quarter, what happened? We were one of the fastest growing nations
David,
in the G7
we just plummeted
in that
this
time.
week to the
so
slowest
So the
growth.
answer is these forecasts are not worth the paper they're walking.
Just this week, it's been revealed that we have plummeted as a country from the fastest growing economy amongst developed economies to the slowest in a 3-month period. OK, if you don't agree with those statistics, what alternative statistics would you put to estimate the effect of no deal? You must have some idea about how much it would cost the British economy.
Yes,
well, give me a figure.
And I started out by telling you what the basis was.
No, what's
that
the figure?
we're already at 58% of our trade is with the rest of the globe.
David,
and that will grow
this
faster
is beneath,
than...
you know as well as I do, if you double the trade with the so-called Anglosphere, with America,
Well,
with
we're not just
India, with
talking
New
the
Zealand, with
Anglosphere.
Canada and Australia, you doubled trade, with all of those great economies, it still wouldn't be as much as
But
we
Nick,
trade
the
with our nearest neighbours.
Nick, the problem with what you're saying is that we know, and it's accepted, and I think even your party accepts that you say you want another referendum, that the British electorate voted to leave.
So the objective
you
should be
sit
to
there-
minimise the damage.
Minimise
You
the
minimise the damage in a way that neither
Are you saying
David
that he
nor-
doesn't want to minimise the damage?
I'll tell you what I think
No,
they've
hang on, no, are you saying that?
I think they've made a catastrophic error by announcing, they didn't need to do this, with the support of the Labour Party, I should add, that we are going to not only leave the political institutions of the European Union, but we're also going to leave Margaret Thatcher's single market. They didn't need to do that. They
Angus
didn't need
Robson,
to.
a brief
There are
word
plenty
from you,
of
and then we must
countries
go on.
which are not in the EU, but
Can
are
I
in the
just
single
finish with
market.
something that I hope we all agree on? A statement was made from the audience, and I'm sorry, but I fundamentally disagree with it. And the statement was that immigration has destroyed this country.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sorry, that's just wrong. It's just wrong.
Okay.
And whether you live in Barnet or whether you live in the north of Scotland, there are people from across Europe and the rest of the world. They work in our health service, they work in our public services, they work in our economy. And without them, things would be a lot worse. And we should remember that, and we should not allow statements like that to be made and allowed to stand.
Let's go on. I know a lot of you want to speak. We'll stick with money and the economy and take a question from Paul Birry, please.
Are Jeremy Corbyn's new tax proposals going to scare away wealth and talent from this country?
The proposals for increasing tax and increasing government spending, are they going to scare away wealth and talent from this country? David Davis, you start on this.
Well, the short answer is yes. I mean, one of the major areas he's looking about raising tax is on corporation tax. Now, corporation tax has come down over the years in rate terms, in terms of the actual rate. And as it's come down, what's happened is the amount collected has gone up. It's now £56 billion. It's at its highest level ever. And the effect of that, I mean, the effect of bringing the tax rate down is that businesses come here, whether it's Microsoft or whether it's Apple or whether it's McDonald's or whether it's...
They don't pay tax anyway.
Well, they do. They do now. Well, let's take that point. It's a fair... I think actually it's a fair point because, you know, one of the problems we have is actually collecting tax from internationally mobile countries. And there's a thing called the tax shortfall, which is the lowest in this country of any country in the Western world, 6%. We collect more tax than anybody else. We have a diverted profits tax, which we collect on, the first in the world. So the answer is, yes, I'm afraid it will. It will drive business away. That will cut jobs. It'll cut wealth creation, it'll cut the tax base, and it'll end up not delivering. And one of the things the IFS said was he would not be able to deliver on the basis of that tax policy.
Barry Gardiner.
Under Margaret Thatcher, corporation tax in this country was 52%, and the lowest she ever got it to in the last years of her reign as Prime Minister was 34%. This government, in 2010, has taken it from 28% to 19% and says that it will go down to 17%. Our proposal is to take it back up to 26%, half of where it was under Margaret Thatcher, and still 2 points lower than it was in 2010 when this government came into office. And what we've seen in the past 7 years is as corporation tax has gone down, instead of those companies using the money that they've gained to invest in research and development as they ought to have done, in creating new jobs, in growing our economy, what they've actually done is they've stuck on piles of cash in their reserves and given more money to their shareholders. That's not what that money should be used for.
I know we're not allowed. I know we're not allowed to believe in experts anymore. But when the Institute for Fiscal Studies says that these tax increases, it's possible that they would raise nothing because of people's changed behaviour. Exactly. And when David Davis talks about the record high from corporation tax, how do you know this is going to work?
Look, let's be clear about what the Institute of Fiscal Studies did actually say. They looked at the 48.6 billion of our costed manifesto, and let's face it, we actually took the trouble to cost our manifesto, which the Conservatives didn't. The 48.6 billion, that all the things that actually I think probably people in this audience quite think are good policies, like restoring the funding.
We're talking about spending. We were talking about getting the money, not about the spending.
Yeah.
The Institute for Fiscal Studies said it might raise nothing.
And no,
that's what they said.
What they said, they said in the long term, companies always find ways to avoid paying tax, and that's why in the long term that might happen. But what they also said
then you'd be up the creek without a paddle. That happened.
Well, yes, and so would the government now if they were doing it even on the 19% and the 17%, which was the point of my interjection on David earlier.
The stark numbers, Ben. The stark numbers are the take is virtually double at this rate.
The Institute of Fiscal Studies said that actually our programme balanced. In current spending, and you know they did, they said that our current spending balanced. And they said that they thought our estimates of tax revenues at 48.6 might be too high by a maximum of 8.6 billion, they said, because they said it would at least raise the 40 billion. But let's be clear about what the Institute of Fiscal Studies said, and let's be clear that what this government has done is given tax giveaways to the corporations and the very wealthiest in our society, and yet they have cut the benefits. They have cut the funding to our schools. They are not prepared. They have introduced the bedroom tax. All right. They're not prepared to give pensioners the triple lock on their pensions and dignity in old age, and now they're proposing to take their homes away from them with the dementia tax.
All right, then. The man there in the second row, I'll come to you in front before.
Barry,
yes.
I've been through your costings in quite a lot of detail. £48 billion extra tax, you say you'll raise. That matches the 48 billion extra that you say you'll spend. And from an Excel spreadsheet point of view, I agree it balances and it adds up. But the assumptions that underlie it are thoroughly flawed. You say in your manifesto that you will raise 19.4 billion from corporation tax and an additional 3.8 billion from reviewing corporation tax reliefs. That, to my mind, does not add up, given that the current amount of tax raised under in 2013 was 48 billion when the corporation tax rate was at 26%, and it is still the same now that corporation tax is at 19%.
OK. Now, I want to hear from some more members of the audience before I reply. Yes, you may.
So, shall we start to talk about the 350 billion that we were going to get back? Those figures didn't add up. Those figures didn't add up. So, you know...
You mean the 350 million?
Yeah, those figures didn't add up. So we can't base arguments on that. Everybody here knows that there's going to be an issue when it comes to the process and the negotiation and the deal for Brexit. What is the backup plan? What's the strategy in place to support our economy, our education, our NHS and our citizens? We are sitting here very, very concerned. We're sitting here. If it goes through, we've got the confidence. We have the confidence and we want this to work well. But you have to give us back some confidence as well. And we need to see our leader.
The woman there in the second row from the back, yes. You, yes?
I think there's a problem in general with like the British people's attitude towards taxes in the first place. We say we're proud of institutions like our NHS, and then we say we don't want to pay any taxes. Exactly. And you can't have it both ways. You need to pay if you want the services, and I think the services are worth it.
There's a major confusion between tax rate and tax collection going on here. What you end up doing by making the tax rates higher is driving the economy downwards and end up collecting less tax overall by having an economy that's working well for everybody.
So would you cut taxation?
I would keep the tax at the current level.
Oh, I see. You, sir, in the middle, in the second row from the back with spectacles. Yes, you.
We had to correlate 2010 corporation tax with 2010 employment rate. Now, corporation tax has come down, employment has gone up quite a lot. Unemployment had reduced quite a lot. By reducing the corporation tax, employment will increase. So labor policies are pushing us towards, welfare state.
Okay, and the woman over there on the far side, that you, Madam.
David seems very worried about large companies leaving this company in droves if we put the tax levels to 2012 levels. What's actually making the city leave and go to the continent is his favourite thing, Brexit.
Yep.
All right. Angus Robertson, I'll come to you.
So the first question is, what is going to scare away business? And the questioner just a moment ago put her finger on the pulse, because it's not really about what proposals are coming from any of the political parties in this panel. Businesses are leaving now. They are leaving the City of London now. They're moving to Dublin, they're moving to Frankfurt, they're moving to Paris. It's happening already, which is why you should be very, very, very cautious when you hear things like no deal is acceptable from the government. But there is a wider issue that we haven't got onto, and I'm not sure what the next questions are, but there is... I think there's an elephant in the middle of the room here, and it's a choice about what kind of society we want to live in, and are we prepared to pay for it? And the current government wants to carry on with its austerity agenda, making the poorest in society have to pay disproportionately. And I think that has gone on. I think that has gone on for too long. I think politics is about choices, and we should be prepared to pay for our NHS, pay for our welfare state, and have an honest debate about how we do that. We've made proposals about how to do that. Other parties have their plans too. But we cannot live in a society, surely, where it is our disabled, our ill, the poorest in our society are having to pay the price. That has to end. It has to end.
Suzanne Evans.
Yeah. Well, I absolutely agree. But do you know what, Angus? The thing is, the money is there. It's just we have got our priorities wrong. And UKIP is the one party going into this election that's saying it will not raise any taxes whatsoever, because we can give the NHS and social care an extra £11 billion a year by reappropriating money from elsewhere. And starting, yes, with Scotland, Angus, because the Barnett formula is completely flawed and you get too much in Scotland. So we take some of that back.
I think... I wonder how well UKIP are going to do in Scotland after that statement.
Yes.
I would like to say, everybody's always sort of skirting around the subject about finances and economy. Nobody has yet actually defined what we are going to be getting, because currently our schools are in crisis, mental health is in crisis, our disabled children are in crisis, my son is in crisis, and 1.3 million children are currently stuck in a system where there is apparently no funding, but the funding is there to take the parents to court at whatever cost.
And what about the pensioners?
Angus,
there's money to take us to court.
I'm going to stop you, please. David Davis, fair's fair.
The first thing, a number of questions have come up, all of which are absolutely on the point. You've got to have the money to spend it in the first place. Now, we've been hearing an argument around this panel which seems to assume that everybody's looking for a bad outcome or looking for a no outcome. The Prime Minister this afternoon made a speech which was made as plain as can be, that what we're seeking is the best possible Brexit, which will underpin the best possible economic strategy. What we've had for the last 7 years, Nick was involved in part of it, is a circumstance in which we took an economy in which we had the most spectacular deficit, 152 billion pounds a year, the most spectacular debt, the longest depression or recession for a century virtually, and out of that you've had a period in which there's been 2.9 million extra jobs, the highest number of jobs in history, the lowest unemployment since records
sorry,
began.
can I just
And out of that, the money to start to do, to more than start to do something about this. I mean,
I'm sorry, you say that, and we all understand that, but under the
but it's fundamental. It's not a given. It's not a given.
Because why then have children? And according to the Kids Index, the United Nations Child Rights Convention, the UK has slid from 11th position to 156 out of 165. Under your government, how is that possible when you say we are doing so well?
Just explain what the index is.
The Kids Index is part of a survey which is done on a yearly basis to ascertain how children are doing in our country.
All right, Nick Clegg.
And currently we have slid to 156th position.
No, I think the fundamental point you're making, which I'm sure everyone will agree with, is if we want to provide for our NHS, for mental health services, for our schools, for social care, the money needs to come from somewhere. You know, there's no such thing as sort of free stuff. Money doesn't just, doesn't appear out of thin air. Now, so the question is, how do you raise the taxes for that? Now, I think the fundamental fallacy, which is back to Paul's original question about the Labour Party's proposals, is they're saying you can all have lots and lots of free stuff and only 5% of the tax-paying population is going to pay for it. I can tell you, having spent 5 years poring over the tax system in our country, the most difficult bit of the British economy to tax effectively is the top 5%, whether you like it or not. They move. This is what the Institute of Fiscal Studies. They change their behaviour. They relocate. So I think the more honest thing to do, which is why, for instance, the Liberal Democrats have said, if you want to provide for the NHS and social care, this isn't going to be universally popular, but let's just be open about it. Everybody's going to have to chip in. We're saying a penny on the pound of income tax to raise billions and billions of pounds for the NHS and social care. That is a true, tried and tested way. That is a tried and tested way of raising money. What you can't do is what Suzanne says, is do lots of stuff for nothing, and you can't just raise the money from the top 2, 3, 4, 5%. It doesn't work.
OK. Barry, I'll come to you. The man in you in the 1, 2, 3, yes.
There was a report out today which said that the top 1% of people earn 12% of income, but already are paying close to 28% of income tax. What proportion do you think would be fair for these people to be paying?
Barry Gardiner.
Okay. Let me
you
first
answer him first.
Yeah. Well, I want to. The original question was not about Brexit, as David made it.
Why don't you answer that question? About the 5% are already paying 50% of taxes.
The additional 1%. The additional that we would be putting on income tax for the top 5% comes to 6.4 billion of the 48.6 billion extra revenue that we would be raising. Okay, so it's actually a small proportion of that 48.6 billion. But what I wanted to answer was that the gentleman who asked the original question, Paul, said, would these tax proposals drive companies to leave the UK? Well, look, 26%, which is what we are proposing, would still be the lowest corporation tax rate in the G7. It would still be well below the average corporation tax rate in the whole of the G20. So the idea that companies are going to up sticks and go to one of those other countries actually is fanciful. And you know what? They didn't. In 2010, they were paying 28% corporation tax. Now, the real problem is, as some people have said, how do you get the very wealthy to pay the tax they ought to? Because they're very good at secreting it away and using offshore funds.
Do you have any answer to that?
Well,
and very briefly, because you've talked for some time. I want to get back to our...
Not that I could do briefly.
Oh, OK, fine. Right, well, that may be an answer. That may be an answer itself. No, I'm going to take a question. I'm going to take, because we're coming towards the end here. Harvey Sobol, please. I just have your question, and they can answer it as they choose. Harvey.
Why is it that I don't believe anything that any politician tells me, even though I'm a natural optimist?
Well, you've had 5 politicians here. Very briefly, Angus Robertson, you go first.
I'm sorry that that's the experience that you've got. I have to say, I've now... Well, none of us are MPs at the moment, but I've served in Parliament for 16 years, and I have to say, in fairness, I know good people across all of the parties. I think part of people's cynicism is what political parties promise before elections and then what they deliver afterwards. And You know, all of the mainstream parties here have experience of government, and it is tough. So you aren't always able to do everything that you want to do in the timescale that you... So I can understand why people have a cynicism. My takeaway from that is we just have to try harder. And if you don't like what we say and what we do, don't vote for us.
OK. Nick
Vote
Clegg.
for somebody else. Stand yourself.
Nick Clegg.
Well, Harvey, the truth is politicians are flawed. They are failed human beings. We all are. They make mistakes. Boy, have I made a lot in my time.
Yes.
But
Yes, we agree.
Yeah. But here's the thing. And I say this, by the way, for a lot of politicians I know across all political parties. Most politicians I know are not sort of evil people. They're not sort of amoral beings. And I think sometimes the way in which politics is conducted, this is principally our fault, look at the sort of bear pit way in which Prime Minister's questions is conducted, is this brutal sort of winner-takes-all, where you demonise and vilify your opponent. You never accept they ever have a good point. So maybe one of the things we need to be more open about as politicians is that we don't always have all the answers. Of course we make mistakes, and maybe a bit of give and take in politics, which is what we do in our daily lives all the time, might not go amiss.
OK. And brevity won't go amiss at this stage in the programme. Barry Gardiner.
I think we often don't like to get caught out. And therefore what we do is when we're asked a question, we then hedge away and try and answer a slightly different question. Because we know that we can answer that one truthfully.
Is that what you've been doing this evening?
But I, too, am an optimist, and that's why I'm looking forward to next Thursday and a Labour government.
Okay. Suzanne Evans.
Well, I too am an optimist, Harvey. I fell into politics quite by accident, and I have to say sometimes I found it incredibly demoralising. But you do have to just keep going. You know, it's very important. I think one reason why I hope Theresa May doesn't have a huge majority is because we need a decent opposition. The problem is I don't think I see that in the Labour Party. And going back to the economy question, the thought of Jeremy Corbyn being in charge of our Treasury next week absolutely terrifies me.
You're veering away from the question there. David Davis, 20 seconds left.
When Nick Clegg was Deputy Prime Minister, he was at the dispatch box one day, and he turned, and I can't remember what the question was, but he said, in answer, he said, "Don't trust any government, even this one."
Did I say that?
You did. But he was right, because
maybe that's why
the process of democracy is what allows you to winnow out what is the truth, and it forces us to tell the truth and deliver on the truth. And long may it last, particularly next Thursday.
Right. Thank you. Thanks very much. Our time's up now. Not next Thursday, but tomorrow, there's this special question time with Theresa May, the Prime Minister, Jeremy Corbyn. We're live from York on BBC One at 8:30. On Sunday, we've got Nicola Sturgeon and Tim Farron in Edinburgh. That's at 5 to 6, if you can remember all this. And next Friday, that's the night after the general election results are all in, we're going to be back with a special programme. Amanda Iannucci, Alistair Campbell, and others are going to be on it, looking at the entrails of the vote. So if you'd like to come to any of those programmes, there's this address to go to, or you can ring 0330 123 99 88. 5 live listeners, as you know, question time, extra time goes on now. But my thanks to all our panellists who came here and to all of you from Barnet who came to this edition of Question Time. Until tomorrow night at 8:30. Good night.
Looking at the media's performance during the general election campaign, stay up for this week. Next, here on BBC One.
I want answers to the questions I care